Hey everyone, glad to be back and teaching eschatology here in a different format, but I'm glad you could join us. We are going to be finishing up the seven bowls and looking at the seven trumpets will be most of our time today in eschatology. So we ended right at the end of the six seals, and there's a small aside that I wanted to make sure we mentioned, and that is the what is typically called the 144,000 witnesses. It says that there are 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes, which is where we get our 144,000 from. And there's nothing abnormal out of that until it begins to mention the 12 tribes. And what we see here is Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulon, Joseph, and Benjamin. So a couple of interesting things there. You might have noticed that Joseph is mentioned. He is one of the 12 sons of Jacob, but not typically mentioned as one of the 12 tribes because his two sons are Manasseh and Ephraim, and they get a share of the land, not Joseph. So Joseph actually gets a double portion. The other interesting addition is Levi, who is also one of the 12 sons of Jacob, but is the Levitical tribe, and so he typically also does not get mentioned. But with the mentioning of Joseph and Levi, what we do get missing is Ephraim and Dan. Why is this? This is one of the big mysteries people ask. One early thought in church history was that the Antichrist himself would come from the tribe of Dan. Most people believe that this should say Ephraim here. Dan and Ephraim were just known for their idolatry, and so this is a form of punishment, if you would, that they cannot take part in the this job of witnessing a great reward from God, and so they are left out of this 144,000. Others finally just would allegorize the meaning, the reading, and just say, this is just talking about people from Israel who are witnessing. It doesn't specifically mean exactly from each of these tribes, and so that would be the allegorical reading that we've seen many times. Finally, I mentioned it real quickly, is this seventh seal, which is silence. And what we see here with silence is that it's very specifically given time of half an hour. This is one of the interesting things in the book of Revelation. There's a couple mentions that are very specific in their time, and it's hard to allegorize or spiritualize these things. I typically think of this as being kind of a hold your breath before something bad is about to happen. You get a really quick break from all these judgments, and then more judgment is coming. It doesn't take long. And we move right from this 8:1 of silence to the other judgments that are coming right behind it. So now we begin our seven trumpets. And these begin in chapter 8. And I just want you to see these, verse 7 here. They are blown by the seven angels. Here you get the seven angels so the seven angels blow the seven trumpets. And the first one in verse 7 says, the first angel blew his trumpet, and there followed hail and fire mixed with blood. And these were thrown upon the earth, and a third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. So it's interesting to note a couple things that we're going to see as themes in this set of judgments. The first one is this number one third, a third of. We're going to see that a lot during this time. And the other thing is we're going to see that many of these judgments in the trumpet series come from the sky. And so there's also some allusions that we're going to be looking at here. There's two, one being, of course, the Sodom and Gomorrah story in Genesis 19, sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And then the allusion that we're going to see quite a bit is from the 10 plagues of Egypt in Exodus. And here it's Exodus 9:23. The Lord sent thunder and hail, and fire ran down to the earth. Hail, fire, blood, fire and brimstone is what I think of. Devastation, again, coming from the sky. It just with the blood, you get the sense that there's going to be death as well, but specifically trees and grass are destroyed, living things, which makes sense. He calls it hail, which is their word for hail, which we know is not really fire. But again, John is just looking and seeing. And how does he describe fiery rocks from the sky. He calls them hail. And so some have suggested meteor showers and weapons of mass destruction and all kinds of things for what these are. We're stuck with what John tells us they are: hail mixed with fire, mixed with blood, leading to 1/3 of the earth's vegetation and grassland and trees being destroyed. The trumpets continue with the second one, and again, we'll see the same pattern. The second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and 1/3 of the sea became blood. 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. And so again, we see the pattern of 1/3. It says a simile like a great mountain. It doesn't say that the mountain is coming from the sky, but it does seem like it's thrown into the sea. Where would it come from? Again, some have suggested large meteors or something like that, but it does seem to be a pattern of things coming from the sky. The illusion that we get from the Exodus is, of course, the Nile turning into blood in Exodus 7. In that story, not just 1/3, but all the fish in the Nile die. Here we only get 1/3. And so again, when John says that he sees the sea, he sees the sea turn to blood, is he saying that it's actual blood? Or is this again some kind of a description of death that fills the sea? Of course, if 1/3 of the sea life dies, I don't know if you've ever been to the ocean or to a lake when there's a lot of dead fish, or and then of course it's not just fish and sea life, but also the ships are destroyed as well, which makes it seem like some kind of attack or something, and then there would be a lot of death inside of there. Um, so again, is that an allusion to death, or is it actual blood that the sea turns into? I tend to think it's an allusion to death, not like the Nile, because in the Nile story, when the Nile turns to blood, all the fish die. Here we see 1/3 of them dying, so it tends to be more like an allusion to that. The third trumpet again continues some of these same patterns. Verse 10, the third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star fell from heaven, blazing like a torch, and it fell on 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of the water. The name of the star is wormwood. 1/3 of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the water because it had been made bitter. And the word wormwood you can see in Leviticus, oh, sorry, not Leviticus, Lamentations 3. Jeremiah uses it several times as just something that has been made bitter. Lamentations is a story about Jeremiah lamenting the capture and destruction of Jerusalem, and so there is the reference to bitterness. Um, it is a bitter tasting plant, but here it's just interesting. He calls the star wormwood, and it causes the rivers to become wormwood. Is that a personification of this star? In a few trumpets, we'll see that happening, or is this saying just a star or something fell on the waters and caused the waters to be poisonous? Notice that people die, but it doesn't say 1/3 of the people. It just says some of the people die, or many people die, but not 1/3. Though only 1/3 of the waters become wormwood. Again, this seems like it's not all over the earth, just 1/3. What could cause that? This is a difficult one to figure out. What could cause 1/3 of the rivers to be turned into bitter, poisonous water? Some kind of biological attack, some kind of star that's poisoned, or meteor that's poisoned from the sky. What could it be? How could it land on 1/3 of the rivers? It's a little confusing. Again, not sure how John comes up with his numbers or what he's seeing specifically when he describes this one. Again, the fourth trumpet continues some of these exact same patterns. Sorry, that was the wrong passage there. The fourth angel blew his trumpet, and 1/3 of the sun was struck, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars, so that 1/3 of their light might be darkened, and 1/3 of the day might be kept from shining, and likewise 1/3 of the night. So it's pretty obvious that the third pattern continues. It also continues the pattern that these are all things from the sky, the sun, the moon, and the stars. And we also have an allusion to another one of the plagues, the plague of darkness. A little different in the Exodus 10 plague of darkness. It is dark for 3 straight days, complete darkness over the land of Egypt, which would be quite different than what we're describing here. Here, it seems like 1/3 of the light gets knocked out. And the question really is this mean, let me give you an example. If there's 12 hours of daytime, does that mean there are now only 8 hours of daytime? Or does it mean more like a dimmer switch? If you had the daylight at the full blast, you have to bring it down a third, and that's what we're talking about. Which of these is the case? It's hard to know. It does seem like maybe there's something that's in the sky that's actually blocking out both the sun, the moon, and the stars. This could be some kind of object, but it also could be some kind of haze or something in the atmosphere. If any of these things we've been describing has been some kind of biological attack or nuclear attack or anything like that, it could easily cause. I'm again reminded of something like Mount St. Helens, a volcano that could cause this kind of thing as well. It might seem like it takes a third of the light away. Notice this one does not talk about consequences at all. It's not like a third of the people die or a third of anything dies, but we know that if there was less light on the earth, it would cause a lot of consequences. That's what the fourth trumpet would do for sure. There's a short aside, an interlude here, where he says, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth at the blasts of the other trumpets that the three angels are about to blow." Everyone, hold on to your seats. This is my words here. Notice it's outside of the quotes. The angel is saying, you haven't seen anything yet. Hold on to your seats because this is going to be a wild ride. Whoa, whoa, whoa. He talks about these three woes, and that's where we get in the fifth trumpet. I'm not going to read this one because it is 12 verses. You can open your Bible there to 9:1 through 12 and read along as we walk through it. But he does call this the first woe. Here we have another fallen star, but this one is for sure personified. What that means is it does things that a human would do, and so here some people have suspected that this fallen star is a fallen angel or even Satan himself. And so, for an example of that, we have Luke chapter 10, verse 18. It says that he said to them, Jesus said to the 72 returning, "I saw Satan fall like lightning and from heaven." I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. And so there's the idea that possibly that's a description of what happened here. This angel falls from the sky, could be Satan, according to Luke 10:18, has an allusion to that. Others suggest that this fallen angel is a specific fallen angel, and in the end, in verse 11 of Revelation 9, it calls him Abaddon as his Hebrew name or Apollyon as his Greek name, which both of these words just mean the destroyer or a destroyer. I'm reminded of an old Frank Peretti book. If anybody's ever read This Present Darkness, he talks about this angelic realm, and he calls these specific angels destroyer angels, fallen angels, obviously. And this matches Ephesians 6:12, which is the passage about us being not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, and kind of describing a cosmic struggle that we don't quite fully understand or see amongst the angelic forces. And so this fallen angel very likely could be another fallen angel. We know Legion is named in the Gospels as a fallen angel, and we'll see him in just a second. Another passage that might be talking about him in just a minute. So not sure exactly who this is, but we know it's a personified fallen star, probably an angel, fallen angel of some sort. But we also see that he is given the key to the abyss. So we'll talk about the abyss in just a second, but this signifies that he doesn't have power of himself. There's something greater than him. He doesn't have the key. He can't just go open the abyss whenever he wants. He has to be given the key. Some have suggested this is by the fifth angel who blows the trumpet, or by the Lamb, or by God himself has to grant this power to Abaddon or Apollyon or whoever this is. Similar maybe to the Job story where Satan has to come before God to accuse Job. He can't, or try him or whatever. He can't do it on his own. He has to get permission from God. And so he's given permission to go to this abyss and open this this place. And abyss in some translations is the bottomless pit, but it is in Luke 8:31, I think, that's maybe most significant. That is the passage where Jesus cast out the demons called Legion. And what you see, it's very interesting when they Jesus says, "What's your name?" And it says Legion, for many demons had entered him. And they begged, verse 31, and they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss. This is the same word right here. And so possibly what we're seeing is this holding pen, this prison for fallen angels. And this is, if that's the case, it makes a lot of sense for the rest of this passage, what comes out of this abyss. If that's where fallen angels are kept or held, imprisoned, now this fallen angel is able to open the abyss, which causes demonic warfare visible on the earth. And so, as we move through the rest of this, this is a long one. So that's why we have so many points here. When he opens the abyss, first you get smoke which darkens the sun, which is interesting because we've already seen the sun get darkened, but that's not significant in this passage. The real judgment seems to be the locust-like beast that comes out of the abyss. Walvoord, in one of the books I'm using, Walvoord actually says that these are demons. And again, John doesn't know how to describe them, and so he describes them as locusts, possibly thinking of the destruction that locusts do on the earth, maybe the way they move or the way they look. He calls them locusts, whatever it is. We're not sure, but they do have a demonic nature to them. Again, another allusion to Exodus, the plagues. We have the plague of locusts in Exodus 10, though these locusts in Exodus don't seem to be demonic. They seem to be eating and devouring plant life, which we'll see is different than these. Again, we see that these locusts, these demons, whatever they are not, they are still under control of God. They are specifically told that they are not to target those who are marked by the seal of God. And so this is interesting because we often talk about the seal of the beast, getting marked with some kind of number of 666 or something. But here we actually see a mark of God. And what it is, it's hard to know. It just says that there's something on their foreheads. If anybody is familiar with the Left Behind series, you might remember that they had some kind of cross that was on their foreheads that only other saved believers could see. Continuing on, the locusts are also told not to harm anything growing. Again, very different than normal locusts or what the locusts in the Egyptian plague would have been like. Only people. We also get a very specific time frame that these locusts, these demonic locusts, let's call them, are to be on the earth for 5 months. And you might think this was a time of death, but unfortunately, it says the locusts were told only to torment, not to kill. And it was so bad that the people wanted to die, would long to die, but not be able to. That's how terrible the punishment, the torment, the tribulation must have been during these 5 months. Then there's a strange, peculiar description of these locusts. You'll see there under letter N. Horses, they're like horses prepared for battle, crowns of gold on their heads, human faces, women's hair, teeth like lions, breastplates of iron, wings that sounded like rushing chariots, tails and stings like scorpions. What's this describing? Again, I just point you back to the idea that John is just using words that he knows how to describe something. Could this possibly be a weapon of modern warfare that we know of? Sure, it does. There's a lot of similarities there, but it could also be something that we don't even know of yet, that could be coming into the future. And so it's difficult to know from John's description of what this means. I wouldn't try to allegorize. This is, if you spiritualize or allegorize this, you try to look for what each one of these things mean. That's not what I think he's doing here. I think he's just trying to describe what he sees in this fifth trumpet. The sixth trumpet sounds, and this time 4 angels are released that are bound at the river Euphrates. The Bible says that they were specifically prepared for this time, and they're preparation was to kill 1/3 of mankind. And so if you add up the 1/4 of mankind in the bowl trump judgments and 1/3 of mankind in the 7 trumpets, you get to 1/2 of the world's population has died. And just a reminder, if you think of the earth as being 8 billion people, that's approximately 4 billion people dying during this time. And we've at least had a few comments about time, so we know this isn't like all at once, but it's over probably less than half of the 7 years, 3.5 years have gone by at this point. So that's a lot of death in just 3 years or so. Some see these 4 angels as fallen angels, similar to the fifth trumpet. Others see these more like angels of God of judgment, similar to the angel at Passover. If you remember in the again the allusion to this could be an allusion to the plagues of Egypt, where the angel comes over and kills the firstborn, or also in 2 Samuel 24, there's an angel that kills as a judgment on David around 70,000 Israelites as well. But it's interesting that the judgment isn't done by the angels. It seems like it's done by this gigantic army. Whether the angels lead them or direct them, it's unsure. The army, according to my math, is 10,000 times 10,000 times 2 is 200 million soldiers. And this is where you sometimes, if you read people that talk about eschatology, talk about China or something like that, because who could come up with an army of 200 million soldiers? America certainly couldn't. Probably only 1 or 2 countries on the earth could come up with an army that large at this point. Maybe a coalition of armies, something like that, is another idea as well. But the other thing we have to think about is that's again thinking that it's going to happen in our time, and we just don't know when exactly this is going to happen. So the world's population could shift in 100 years or 200 years, and this number could be a totally different place on the earth. So we have to be careful of guessing countries based on this number. The army is also given a description here. We see breastplate of fire and sapphire and sulfur, heads of horses like lions, fire, smoke, and sulfur come out of their mouths, which the scriptures say is what does the killing of 1/3 of mankind. Now, again, this could easily be describing some kind of weapon of war, modern warfare, tanks, artillery, things like that. Would not be far from our imagination. John, again, is just describing what he sees. It's interesting that the passage also says that the rest of mankind that did not die did not repent as well. So it's the judgment happens. All this judgment is happening, and the world does not repent of their sins. They stand firm. They stand firm against God. So it's very indignant of them as God is judging them. There's another aside that happens here, a very interesting one that I'm just titling The Two Witnesses. First, there's these 7 thunders that John hears, and he's told not to write this down, but let it remain a mystery. And then there's this allusion to Ezekiel 3, where John is told to eat a scroll. It says that it was sweet to the taste, but it made him sick to the stomach. And this is almost the exact same thing that happens to Ezekiel. And the meaning of the prophecy in Ezekiel, and I believe here in Revelation as well, is that there's more to go. He has more to say. He's not done yet. And of course, we're only in chapter 9 or so. We certainly have more to go in the scriptures. So then we get the story of the two witnesses. So these two witnesses, it says they prophesy on the earth for 1,260 days, which in the Jewish calendar of 360 days would be 3.5 years. Very obvious connection there to the 7-year tribulation, halfway through the tribulation. If you remember Daniel 9, there was definitely some talk about what happens at the halfway point of the tribulation. Makes me want to think that these two were the first half of the tribulation, especially when you see what happens to them at the 3.5 year mark. They have the power, they're witnessing, that's their word there is that they are witnesses, but they also have the power to kill, plague, turn water into blood. Again, very similar to Moses going into Egypt. I think there's definite allusions there to that. And then at the 3.5 year mark, the beast from the abyss kills them. For 3.5 days, the world celebrates, but then they rise again. And when they do that, they are ultimately taken back into heaven. in a cloud, reminiscent of Elijah in 2 Kings 2:11. And the first woe, this is called the second woe. So whatever they do seems to cause a lot of chaos on the earth and a lot of destruction there on the earth as well. And it gets called the second woe. And then finally, the passage ends, our seventh trumpet ends with not a judgment, but a proclamation of the reign of Christ on earth. So it makes sense that, again, this is not necessarily chronological, but more like people are the trumpet sounds to say, like, this is it. Christ is going to reign on the earth as we end our seven trumpets. We're getting closer to the end of our tribulation discussion. We're going to move on to the bowls next week and then move forward into the end of the tribulation, the kingdom, and heaven and hell, end times type of stuff. So hope you enjoyed this time. And as always, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.